Hello, we're going to wait just about one more minute to make sure everyone has signed into the event, and then we will begin. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Rafe Beck. I serve as the Executive Director of the UO Alumni Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's interactive workshop called Building Your Resilience. This is a workshop that several of our staff members participated in on campus not too long ago and enjoyed it so much that we decided we wanted to share it with alumni, and we're delighted that so many of you have decided to take some time today and join us for the workshop. We'll begin today's event, as we often do, with our land acknowledgement statement, which I'm pleased to announce. The University of Oregon in Eugene is located within the traditional homelands of the Southern Kalapuya. Following the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. Today, descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. We recognize UO's presence in Portland as well, on the ancestral homelands of the Cowlitz and Clackamas peoples, the Oregon Institute of Marine Biology in Charleston, on the ancestral homelands of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, Siuslaw, and Milakoos people, and the Pine Mountain Observatory in Bend, on the ancestral homelands of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. With that, I'll turn things over to my colleague, Megan McKinney. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rafe. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Megan McKinney, and I am the Associate Director of the Duck Career Network. Before we begin, I have to acknowledge a few of my colleagues in the Alumni Association who have helped make this event possible, including Jesse Rowe, Eric Jelm, and Julie DeBias, who's working behind the scenes assisting with the technology during this event. The four of us serve on a virtual engagement task force, helping to create and promote virtual events to Duck alumni. So shout out to you three, and thank you for all of your hard work. I have the pleasure of introducing our featured speaker for this evening, Mariko Lin. Mariko is the Assistant Director and Education and Prevention Outreach Director at UO Counseling Services. Her presentation is all about building resilience, and she'll be giving us some practical reasons and tools to help us see the benefit from doing what we can to maintain our energy reserves during these most unusual times we're living in. Mariko will also address the importance of figuring out where your personal values and purpose can fit into the context of career, school, and home life. She'll be leading us through an activity to help us audit our own current energy levels and discover where we could use a boost to operate at our best in all areas of life. We hope that you'll leave with action items to apply when challenges arise and identify personal areas of strength to continue navigating this new normal. And so with that, Mariko, I'm going to hand it off to you to begin.
All right, thank you then, Megan. I'm gonna go ahead and share screen. So just give me a second here and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so first off, I just want to say a special thanks to the Alumni Association for letting me spend a portion of this evening with you all to talk about resilience. So I just want to start off by recognizing, my goodness, it's been a very challenging year, and I think we all know it. I think we've all suffered in our own ways. And, I will say it's been nice because I think we are starting to feel a little bit normal, or I guess we can say transitioning to a new normal. But I can imagine all of you came here for a reason. And so some of you may be still in the thick of that, just struggling and just trying to survive, whereas others of you are probably doing a lot better and maybe just needing a recharge and a reminder of what resilience looks like and to reflect back on the year. And many of you may just find yourself somewhere in between. So I just want to acknowledge you all, and just to say, whenever I do these presentations, my hope is always that you can at least take one thing from this presentation, and I will certainly come back to that at the very end. All right, so let's talk about building your resilience, but I do want to talk about 2020. I know we would love for that year to go by very quickly, and it did, but there was a lot that happened. I think it's important for us to acknowledge, first, with the global pandemic that we are still in the midst of, many of us needing to find a way to work from home and finding that balance, for that work-life balance that can be very challenging. We're grieving the loss of events and sadly people due to COVID. I'll even say for myself, I just came back from a trip to Chicago to visit with my family and friends, and some of them met Kenji in person for the first time, and I just can't believe 17 months passed and they didn't get to hold him. And then certainly we're all trying to figure out, how do we reconnect with our friends in person? And I thought it was really interesting. I saw this fact. Nearly 50% of Americans say they feel anxious about resuming in-person interactions post-pandemic, according to a report from the American Psychological Association. This new phenomenon is called reentry anxiety. I'm sure some of you are feeling that. I myself am feeling that as well. I also want to recognize the social injustices that have been happening in our world and our nation, and particularly when we think about Black Lives Matter. And let's be honest with ourselves, these things have been happening for centuries. We're just witnessing it that much more. With that, I think in this conversation about resilience, it's more important to recognize that it is complicated and nuanced, especially for those that have marginalized identities, especially when there's systems of oppression that are working against us, and why resilience is that much more important. And I do want to note the Oregon wildfires. I mean, they were right in our backyard. I know some of you are not in Oregon anymore, but Oregon is still your home because you were here on campus way back whenever we were in school. And that was a really tough time for all of us to witness the fires that are happening all around us. And then certainly with the election that happened last year, enough said with that, right? I'm not going to spend too much on this particular side, but I do want to show you this because it was really revelational for me when I first saw it. So it's called The Emotional Phases During a Disaster, and it's by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. When I first saw this graph, it was way back in April and May. And I don't know if you remember that terminology we were saying, that we were flattening the curve of the pandemic. I kind of believe that back then we were in the honeymoon stage. We didn't realize how long this was going to last, how long the vaccine would take. Maybe right now we could say we were in reconstruction, but when I think about all the different events that happened last year, we were going through this sort of phases over and over again. And I think that's important for us to recognize that we're all experiencing a collective trauma from last year, and however we're trying to recover and find our resilience as we navigate through all of this. So let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about resilience. I think there are so many different definitions about resilience, so I wanted to share with you some of them. It's the ability to bounce back from stress and struggle, being able to overcome challenges or obstacles, ability to deal with life setbacks, ability to accept change, and the process of successful adaptation. So through Merriam-Webster, it's called the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. So you all know I'm a psychologist. I work with a lot of students, and in this landscape of social media, so many of them compare themselves to their peers. Like, oh, I wish I had their lives. But what I always want to say to them is that we don't want those perfect lives, because we don't learn resilience from having that. We're not born with resilience. Resilience really comes from struggle, right? It's what you learn when there's something that happens that's challenging, and certainly this year has been one of those times. And I'll oftentimes even say for myself, I sometimes don't even realize the struggle until after it's done, because I'm just trying to get through it and I'm wading through it. But resilience is really important in all those times. So before I dive in and talk about resiliency, I want to tell you a little bit about this article that I had found, the Energy Project, called Managing Your Energy, Not Your Time. It's by Tony Schwartz and Catherine McCarthy. And what I loved about this particular article that kind of frames, I guess you would say, this presentation today, is that I've done a fair amount of presentations on resilience before, different from this resilience presentation. And then I've read a whole bunch of articles on resilience. And typically there are a lot of different themes, but they're all trying to say the same things, but using different language. And what I just loved about this particular article is this energy project and the dimensions that they go through that really packaged all the things I like to talk about when I talk about resilience. But certainly you're going to see it from my own psychologist lens as we talk about all these different dimensions about managing your energy and not your time. All right, so let's talk about what that means. I don't know about you, but I oftentimes hear people say, I want to balance my life better. I've said it for years, right? But I think when people are thinking about that, they're oftentimes thinking about time, when really we should think about how channeling our energy. I'm imagining that many of you are coming here because you're feeling exhausted, perhaps burnt out, and inevitably in this pandemic sort of world, it's taken quite a toll on ourselves, both physically, I have to say both, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I also I imagine, in the organizations that you're working with, we're oftentimes talking about professional development. And when we talk about that, we're thinking about skills, knowledge, and competence, when really, I hope you take this back to your organizations and talk about how do we renew ourselves so we sustain our capacity and our energy so that we can sustain our value throughout our lives. So the 4 dimensions of energy that we're going to be talking about is 1, body, physical energy, emotions, quality of energy, 3, focus of energy, mind, focus of energy, spirit, energy of meaning and purpose. So what I'm going to ask you all to do right now is to do an energy audit. It's pretty simple. We're going to do it all together. So I'm going to ask you all to get out a piece of paper and pen or whatever writing utensil you have. And then on that piece of paper, what I want you to do is label either 4 columns or rows with 1, body, so B for body, E for emotions. Actually, I'm going to go back a slide so you can see that. B for body, E for emotions, M for mind, and 4 for spirit. So 4 rows or 4 columns, whatever you want to do. And then I'm going to take you through this audit together, okay? So there are basically 4 items within each of these dimensions. So if the statement is true for you, you just want to check it off, okay? So for our body, let's see if these are true for you. I don't regularly get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and I often wake up feeling tired. If it's true for you, check it off. I frequently skip breakfast or I settle for something that isn't nutritious. Check it off if it's true for you. I don't work out enough, meaning cardiovascular training at least 3 times a week and strength training at least once a week. I will say, I like to just say, are you getting enough movement? And if you're not, check this off. So if you're not feeling you're getting enough movement in your body, I would check that off. I don't take regular breaks during the day to truly renew and recharge, or I often eat lunch at my desk if I eat at all. Okay, so check that off if it's true for yourself. So that's about our body. Let's talk about our emotions. I frequently find myself irritable, impatient, or anxious at work, especially when work is demanding. I will tell you that is one of my red flags. I will admit that. So the second one for emotions, I don't have enough time with my family and loved ones. And when I'm with them, I'm not always really with them. I'm not really present. I don't really feel like I'm engaged with them. Number 3, I have too little time for the activities that I most deeply enjoy. And number 4, I don't stop frequently enough to express my appreciation and gratitude to others or to savor my accomplishments and blessings. So that's our emotions. Okay, we're moving on to the 3rd dimension, that's our mind. I have difficulty focusing on one thing at a time, and I'm easily distracted during the day, especially by email. Number 2, I spend much of my day reacting to immediate crises and demands rather than focusing on activities with longer-term value and high leverage. Number 3, I don't take enough time for reflection, strategizing, and creative thinking. And then number 4, I work in the evenings or on weekends, and I almost never take an email-free vacation. I told you I went to Chicago. I had 2 hours of email. I was mad at myself. So the last one is our spirit. So if you have the first one, I don't spend enough time at work doing what I do best and enjoy most. You want to check that off. There are significant gaps between what I say is most important to me in my life and how I actually allocate my time and energy. Check that off if it's true for you. My decisions at work are often more often influenced by external demands than by a strong, clear sense of my own purpose. And then number 4, I don't invest enough time and energy in making a positive difference to others or to the world. So you're going to check off those. So next, you are going to basically tally up with all the different dimensions and see what score you get as a total. And then also you want to see 0 to 4 for each dimension. So if you're 0 to 3, you actually should probably not even be here, but I love that you're here. So you're doing excellent with your energy management skills. If you got 4 to 6, that's reasonable energy management skills. 7 to 10, significant energy management deficits, and 11 to 16, a full-fledged energy management crisis, which I hope you aren't in, but I'm glad you're here if you are. And I'll just say to you all, I'll tell you, when I took this in the fall, when I first saw this audit, I was struggling. I was in that full-fledged energy management crisis. Whereas now I probably find myself in the reasonable energy management skills, but I can flex up and down, depending on how things are going at work. So we're going to actually put up a poll right now so we can see where you all are at in terms of what you're needing to focus on when it comes to these 4 dimensions. So as you can see in the poll, which one of the 4 energy sources do you need to focus on the most? We talked about body, emotion, mind, and spirit. I realize I think I'm the only one that gets to see this poll. A lot going on. I think there's a lot. It almost seems pretty equal. All right, we have about 50% of people that have voted, so we still have a fair amount more that need to vote. Okay, this is interesting. I think we got it. I think we can end the polling and show what we got. So which one of the 4 energy sources do you need to focus on the most? So the number 1 was mind. But as you can see, I think it seems almost like a pretty pretty proportional split between all 4. But mind came first with 33%. It looks like spirit afterwards with 29%, emotion at 20%, and then body with 17%. All right. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move along. So let's talk about the different dimensions. So I'm going to jump and dive on in to talk about body. And so I will say with this particular slide, I'm not going to mention too much because I think this is one of those where you're like, I know what I kind of need to do. So it's not big news for you all. So in terms of just taking care of one's physical body, it's about eating, exercise, and sleep. So I think of eating, it's whether we choose to eat or not, like breakfast, right? Or how much and what we decide to eat and if it's nutritious. When I talk about exercise, I usually actually, like you saw it or heard me talk about earlier, I'd like to talk about it in terms of movement. Are we getting enough movement in our body? To me, I take a walk every day with my partner and my son, and I just love it. That's enough that I need. I know I want to work out, but if I get the movement through walking, that's good enough because I get connection time at the same time. And then about sleep, are we hitting the sweet spot in terms of how much sleep we're needing? And so just know, it goes without saying that it is really important to take care of your body. And actually woven through this under this presentation, I'm going to talk about what studies say when you do these things to take care of yourself, this is how you benefit, because I want this to be motivational for you all to do these things much more for yourself to build that resilience. So if we do take better care of our bodies, we can have more focus on one's attention, we can feel more productive, we can manage our emotions better, because otherwise you're oftentimes going to feel more stressed and moody. I'll actually share with you all, when I was in graduate school, I was getting on average probably 5 hours of sleep a night. And I'll never forget that when I was actually more studying my job, my current job, I realized, I was like, wow, I didn't realize why I was so tearful that whole time. I just thought I was an emotional being, but really I just wasn't getting enough sleep. So really, I think emotions are intensified when you're not taking good care of your body. And certainly this can manifest in physical illness, potentially chronic illness if you're not taking care of your body. So let's talk about taking a break. And so we can't underestimate the importance of taking a break. And it's not about length, it's really about quality of the break. But I want to take a pause right here and actually use the chat. So I want to hear from all of you. What is something you do while taking a break from work? So let's hear from you all. I'd love to hear some creative things that you do. I'll never forget one of my staff members at University Counseling Services says he closes the door and has a dance party. And I wouldn't have expected it from him because, well, I just wouldn't have, but I loved it. Oh, how collect eggs from the chicken co-op. I don't know how to say it. Coop, sorry, that's right. Fold laundry, go for a walk, listen to music. Leave the room completely, deep breathe. Oh, there's a lot of good ones. Pull weeds in the garden. I think that's really fulfilling because it's actually productive. Paint by number, meditation. Oh my gosh, there's so many good things that are coming across. I can't even say them fast enough. Short walk, reading to my children, mess with my cat. Love all this stuff. Good. You all have good stuff and creative things. I appreciate it. So for some of you that may not take breaks, let me just tell you why it's really important. It's really grounded in our own physiology. So I actually didn't know this until I did some research on it. And then it made me realize, I was like, okay, taking a break is really important. That's one of the things I need to get better at. So we go through what's called this ultradian rhythm throughout the day. Think of them as mini versions of our circadian rhythm that happen within basically a 2-hour time span, 90 to 120 minutes time span. So within these periods, our body has a period of significant energy and alertness, followed by a period of fatigue, the ultradian trough, in which we crave a period of recovery. I will say, admittedly, I don't know about you all, but there are times when I'm pushing through that 2 hours and I keep on working and I'm not taking that break. So that's why when you look at this sort of cycle through that sort of 2-hour time span, it is so important to take that break, because how does it impact our health? I'll tell you how. It lowers our immunity. It slows down one's metabolism, increases blood pressure, decreases productivity and creativity, and you just can't think straight, especially this is what's been found in studies. And so I thought that was really interesting, and it really highlighted the importance of taking a break during your day, especially when we're working at home when it can be that much harder. All right, so that's about taking breaks. So I'm going to move along to emotions. Interestingly enough, I will say, I know it was an even spread of what people wanted to work on. I am going to spend a little bit more time on emotions. I will say it's probably my bias as somebody that's in my field. So let's talk about emotions. I do want to ask you before I dive in a reflection question. So you don't have to put it into the chat unless you feel comfortable doing so. I'm not going to read them out loud. You all can read it if when they come up. But if you'd like to just reflect on this, what is one of your warning signs, red flags when you know you're getting stressed? I want you to reflect to yourself. Just think about it. What is one of your warning signs, red flags when you're getting stressed? I know I mentioned it to you earlier. For me, I can get a little bit irritable, and I know my partner can know that. And you can actually ask the people that love you. They'll know that answer. That's the hope. All right. So when it comes to emotions, it's important to recognize and be able to control one's emotions because it does have a direct impact on quality of energy. So I'm actually going to give you a crash course in stress management. Just know, usually we do this as like an hour-long workshop for students. So I'm just doing it probably within a minute. So I'm just going to give you what I think is most important when we talk about stress management. It's really important to know what are your triggers. What do you usually get triggered or stressed out about? And we're all unique in that sort of way. I know for me, I'll tell you mine. I have an overwhelming email inbox when I feel misunderstood when I'm having a conversation, whether with my boss or my loved ones, or when I'm trying to balance people's needs. I'm trying to be overly thoughtful and I'm overly self-conscious about a situation that can get me really stressed out. So I'm curious for you, how do you get stressed out? Then you want to really think about, well, how does it show up for you? Like I asked you all before, what are your warning signs when you're stressed? For some people, I think it's withdrawing from others. I'm just going to give you some examples. For other people, they can take it to themselves internally, like being overly self-critical, or perhaps it can show up in their sleep, lack of sleep, too much sleep. And I want to admit, I think it happens for some people. Their warning signs is when they get anxious or depressed, and sometimes it can manifest in chronic illness or some sort of physical aches and pains. So when we're stressed out and we see these warning signs, that's when it's really important to think about our coping strategies. You really need to think about what brings you joy in your life. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the spirit dimension. How do we bring that into our life to build that sense of resilience and bring that energy into our life? One of the other parts about talking about our emotions is I want to highlight the importance of taking deep breaths. So I know in this pandemic year, I've oftentimes found myself in survival mode. I know we can also think of it as being in fight or flight mode. It almost feels like that roller coaster that you can't get off on, right? You can't think clearly, logically, or reflectively when you feel like you just can't stop whatever you're trying to do to survive. So one really huge and important and simple way to get yourself off that roller coaster or to get off that fight or flight mode is just to take a simple deep breath. And I'll tell you, there are so many different types of breathing exercises that one can do, but I'd like to give you just one easy one that you can do at any point in time. So I know that many people have the habit of breathing through their chest, and I actually think it's very inefficient breathing and also quite restrictive. Really, when you're wanting to have that deep breath, you're going to be filling your belly with air. And so it's called deep abdominal breathing and belly breathing that we're going to be talking through. And it actually induces relaxation and recovery. So I'm going to ask you all, I can't see you all, but I want for you all to take your hand and just put it on your stomach, because that's how you're going to feel the rise and fall of your breath. You don't want it to go just in your chest. You want it to reach all the way down to your belly, right? So I'm going to actually talk you through this, and then we're going to do it together. So first, I'm just going to ask you to inhale, belly goes out, filling with air, and then exhale, belly goes in. So then inhale, belly goes out, filling with air, exhale, belly goes in. Inhale, belly goes out. Filling with air, exhale, belly goes in. Doing this simple activity whenever you find yourself having that tension in your arms or your shoulders, or if you find yourself in that fight or flight mode, is an easy way to get out of that. Or for some of you that may have anxiety or panic attacks, this is one simple way to potentially help you in those situations. By taking those sort of deep breaths, just know some of the benefits include blood health, increases your stamina, it provides overall relaxation and less tension, and it leads to a better immune system, which I think is pretty good. I think for many of us, like I used to be very much a chest breather. I had to relearn how to do this sort of breathing when I first learned about this activity. So if those of you that are kind of find yourself into having like a shortness of breath, it's a really good activity for you to do. So let's talk about gratitude. I love this. And I'll just say, when I read up more about gratitude, and it's a very simple thing that we all can do any day, any time of the day, I have found the most benefits that come from doing gratitude exercises when you look at different studies and they find the benefits from them. So I'm going to share that with you. So you, again, motivation to do this on a daily basis, right? So when people actually engage in gratitude exercises, they have better physical health, more better psychological health, increasing happiness, reduces depression, enhances empathy, they sleep better, improves self-esteem, deepens friendships, increases productivity, fosters resilience. It was actually found to increase one's lifespan and makes our memories happier. So quite a wide array of benefits just from doing a gratitude exercise. So I'm going to show you, as you can see on the slide, here's one simple one that you can do just for yourself, or actually I would highly encourage you to do it with those that you love, whether it's your partner, it could be the children in your life, it could be the people that you work with, it could be anybody, right? So you can just ask yourself the question, what am I grateful for today? What's a simple thing I'm grateful for? What am I grateful for about myself? And I really want to highlight this one because I do not think we compliment ourselves enough. I remember in a time in my life when I was doing more gratitude exercises and I actually asked myself that question, and I really could feel the difference of like, oh yeah, I'm really self-critical. If I just asked myself what I did really well that day, I could feel my mood being boosted. And then if you're with someone else, you can also say, what am I grateful about you? I'll tell you, I do this exercise with students when we've had a pretty deep session. And I'm like, now that we talked about all these traumatic things, I need you to get out back into the world. And I want you to feel good in that transition. So we'll do this activity. And they're always surprised when I say that last part, what am I grateful about you? I swear every single time I get a smile when they leave. So I just want to say, don't forget to be grateful about yourself and the people around you. So I'm actually wanting to bring it back to the chat. I'd like to hear from you all. What's one simple thing that you're grateful for just right now, just for today? So what's that one simple thing that you're grateful for today? One's health, family, dog, family, health. Oh, we're getting a lot of repeats, but that's all good things. Great weather, finally, my job, retirement, sunshine. Oh, good retirement. I wish I had retirement. I'm gratitude for clean drinking water, running car, internet. Yeah, that's good. Air conditioner, Oregon, healthy food, so many good things. So as you can see, you can do this simple activity. And I'll tell you, ever since the pandemic started, and especially now that I have a little one, every night I always think about the simple things that my little one does just to remind myself and something that I can look back on. So another part of talking about emotions, let's talk about changing the narrative. So how to take care of your emotions and changing the stories that we may I guess you can say, like, create for ourselves. Because I know certainly we can oftentimes create these sort of stories for ourselves that may not be really actually true and helpful for one another, or oneself. And I'll say this is a really good one, especially for those that have a tendency to be self-critical or catastrophize. And so when I say catastrophize, what I really mean is the ones that make the worst of a situation or think the worst case scenario. So let's talk about the reverse lens. One could ask themselves this question, especially if you're a catastrophizer. What would another person say about the same situation? In what ways might that be true? So in this sort of case, it would be really important to consider what evidence or facts are true of the situation to challenge your thinking. I have so many students that are like, I'm never going to have friends. I'm just like, nobody thinks I'm cool or smart or anything like that. And then I'm like, well, tell me about the things that you did in high school. And then they tell me about all the different activities they've done. And I'm like, you're just being really critical of yourself. You have all this proof to say that you know how to build relationships and how to do that well. So how do we think about that in our lives when we catastrophize or just need a reframe? If you're a self-critical person, I love this question. Actually, when I first saw it, I was like, for me, I felt like it was pretty deep. Would you have a friend who talks to you the way you talk to yourself? So that's another thing to think about, right? For those that can be really challenging and really talking to themselves or talking down to themselves. So let's think about the long lens. How will I most likely view the situation in 6 months? I think that's, again, like another way to just reframe a situation. I oftentimes tell students of a scenario that happened when I was in college. As a first-year student, I was a straight A student in high school. And I remember when I was starting And I was like falling behind in a class. I just wasn't catching up with my reading. And I remember thinking I was going to fail. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even tell my parents that I'm a true failure as I started college. And I remember talking to my brother, who was so super helpful at the time. He said, Mariko, it's not a big deal. You can just drop the class. Just don't make it a pattern. It'll be okay. And so I did just that. And then when I talk to students now who find themselves in that same scenario and they think the world is just going to fall apart, I say, I don't even remember that class anymore. So I think it's just as important to think about it, whether 6 months from now or years from now. Am I going to remember this moment when I feel really stressed out about this one scenario? So when we think about the wide lens, regardless of the outcome of a situation, I think it's always important to ask ourselves, how can I grow and learn from it? So just really just take a pause about, here's a situation that came up, and to reframe it about how can I learn and grow from this situation? I see that as a really important one for those who have a tendency to be either regretful, resentful, or maybe have a lot of shoulds. If you're one of those shoulds people, what I mean by that is like, I should have done this, I should have done that, right? I actually think sometimes these people have a tendency towards depression. And so what I think is it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be depressed or to sit in that emotion, but we really want to work through it and think, well, I don't want this to happen again. So the next time when I feel triggered or stressed and I can get down or depressed about something, how can I avoid this situation and make my situation better for the things I do have control over? So that's about changing the narrative. All right. So moving along, we're going to talk about the mind. And this is one that was pretty popular with you all, right? Let's talk about how you can focus a little bit better. I'm going to share with you some interesting facts about this. So talking about focusing. For those of you that think you're really good multitaskers, let me just share with you some things. Only 2% of the population are actually proficient at multitasking. The problem is that those that actually think they're the best at multitasking are actually the most likely worst ones at it, which I thought was really interesting when I read that. Again, some stats for you all. Studies have found that multitasking reduces your productivity by 40%. Can you believe that? 40%. And it takes 50% longer to finish a task. It also takes more than 25 minutes on average to resume a task after being interrupted. I'll tell you all, by working from home, I don't know if you all use Microsoft Teams, but I think that's the biggest culprit of just feeling like I can't focus sometimes. So it could be a conversation that you have in your workplace to make sure you can be more productive or feel like you have a clearer mind when you're trying to attend to the task that's most important for you. I also thought this was a really interesting study. They found that multitasking when attempting to do cognitive tasks lowered one's IQ scores as much as if study participants had used marijuana or stayed up all night. I mean, can you believe that? I just think that's fascinating. So let's talk about prioritization. So this is all about strategy. It's about being intentional and making a choice to focus systematically on what is going to have the most long-term leverage. So we're going to do a little bit of a polling here for a question that I have for you. So how many of you start your day by responding to emails? So please be honest with your answer. Of course, it's anonymous. How many of you start your day by responding to emails? All right, we're getting the results in. We're up to about 50%. All right. I'm seeing a lot of yes people. I'll tell you why that's interesting. So, all right, cool. Okay, so I think you can all see this. So do you start by your day by responding to emails? The most popular answer was yes, and that's about 50% of you all. Sometimes about 31%, rarely, and then never. We have, rarely is 14% and never 7%. So good for you for the never. I think that's a really hard thing to do. All right, so we can stop the poll. I will just share with you, I'll never forget, I read this article and I'll admittedly share with you all, I have ADHD. And so I found this in an interesting ADHD article and I read this statement. It said, your email inbox is where other people's priorities live. I'm going to say that again because I just thought it was like, what? Your email inbox is where other people's priorities live. So when you're starting your day by responding to other people's emails, you're basically saying it's okay to prioritize others over yourself. And if that's really the case, then I'm going to ask you, are you okay with that? Right? Because we really have a choice there to prioritize ourselves or what we need to do. So it's just something to think about. So I want to transition a little bit more just to say, I think we also have the pattern oftentimes to leave the most challenging work for last. And then when that happens is that we tend not to get to it in the way that we would like or rush through it last minute. So what's more actually strategic and energizing is to identify what is the most challenging task first. So again, take that moment to think about what's the thing that I really should focus on. I think oftentimes one wants to just react to a situation versus it's really important to respond. Responding means taking that moment to reflect and prioritize and really choose what they think is most important. So responding versus reacting and prioritizing what you want to attend to when it comes to your tasks. So that's talking about the mind. So let's talk about the fourth dimension of human spirit and the energy of meaning and purpose. What can happen to the energy of the human spirit if their everyday work and activities are consistent with what they value most? And of course, give them a sense of meaning and purpose. If work actually really matters to you, one's going to feel more positive energy towards that work, positive energy in their life. They can focus better and demonstrate more perseverance and resilience. So in order to access the energy of the human spirit, people need to clarify their priorities and establish accompanying rituals in 3 categories. And so those are the ones that you see right here. And so just know there's a little bit of overlap between these 3 categories. So the first one is doing what you do best and what you enjoy most. It's important to take a moment to reflect upon what I said, what you do best and what you enjoy most at work, because those 2 things are not mutually inclusive. You may get really positive feedback about something you're good at, but is that something you truly enjoy? It's actually not a secret anymore. I tell this to my colleagues or close loved ones that I kind of have a love-hate relationship with doing presentations, right? I get positive feedback, I get asked to do these things, but I know I get a ton of anxiety beforehand, and there's a lot of work that I have to do outside of work to do these sort of presentations. That's something that I have to deal with my supervisor. But then I have to ask you the question, are there tasks in your life, responsibilities in your work life, or maybe those things that they don't line up of being what you do best and what you enjoy most? So let's talk about intention. That's consciously allocating time and energy to the areas of your life you deem most important. So the second one is to live with intention, and that's basically to devote your time and energy to what's most important to you. And that's often, there's often a divide, I would say, between what people say is most important and what they actually do. And I really think that rituals can help close that gap. So if you do say, and I oftentimes hear that from, the students that I work with, they say relationships and family is most important in their lives. So then I have to ask them, well, if you're doing this and that, and you're not really focusing on your family and friends in the way that you want, are you really living the values that you're hoping to? I know for some of you, like, okay, it's 5 o'clock is coming up. How much are you really going to close down that shop? Or some of you maybe just going back and doing some work before you actually just turn yourself off for the rest of the day so it's really a question for you all is how much are you really able to attend to the things that are most important to you? Last but not least, I want to talk about values. And I think that's the overall sort of, I guess you would say, focus of this dimension, living your core values in your daily behaviors. I know in this fast-paced, technology-driven world, it's easy to let external demands dictate our actions. So this is the part where it would be helpful to take a pause and just really ask yourself, what do you really stand for? Who do you really want to be? And how does that fit with how you're leading your life? How is that going to align with how I really want my values to be in accordance to my daily life? When I think of the fourth dimension overall, I think about this final question that it's almost an existential one that I really want you all to think about. It's kind of interesting, but one that I think it's important to just note. What do you want to be remembered by? Do you want to be the person that's remembered by working long hours, or it's really that person that showed the values that are most important to them? I'll tell you mine, it's about being compassionate, learning, community, social justice, and service to others. So we have to kind of remind ourselves, when we can get wrapped up in our work and trying to figure out how to be resilient and show our values in the way that's congruent to what we really need and want in our lives. So I want to take a little bit of time to do some self-reflection. And so that is to ask you the question, how have you learned on or relied upon your community during the past year to maintain your spiritual health in the ways that we talked about just now? That could mean your family, your friends, your work community, your spiritual community, your UO community, or even the Alumni Association and your fellow alumni. So I want to ask you just to self-reflect amongst, to yourself. How have you leaned on or relied upon your community during this past year to maintain your spiritual health? And I will say, my follow-up question to that is, how can you do that even that much better? Because I know for many, this year has been hard in terms of just feeling connected, right? I will say one of my, I guess you could say, critiques of this particular article is that they don't really focus that much on help-seeking behaviors or just thinking about who's our community. So I do want to make sure I share that with you all. How do we strengthen our community to help build our own resilience and think about how do we bring that energy back into our lives? All right. So let's talk about action items. I certainly don't want to leave this presentation without thinking about or having us all reflect upon what can we do for ourselves? What can I take from this presentation? So the first one is just think about for yourself, what is one thing I can already change in my daily life for energy renewal? So when you think about your team, your colleagues, or your supervisor, what is a conversation you can have with that colleague or supervisor towards your energy renewal? Maybe think about what is that task or responsibility in your list of things that you need to do that is not about what you do or enjoy most, right? Or do best at. And then you want to bring in the people that you love. What is the conversation you can have with those you love to help support you in your energy renewal efforts? I remember, like when I think about as spring was coming around, I was like, Brett, we need to start walking again because I really miss the time that we connect with one another. I need to get the movement in my day and I need to get outside. So how do we make sure we're accountable that at 5 o'clock, we're starting dinner so we can have our evening walk all together? So how can you have those sort of conversations with the people that you love to keep you accountable for the things that you're wanting in your life to get that energy renewal and to build your resilience? So this is where I'm going to turn to you all and actually ask you all just to share what is that one thing that you can already change in your life for that energy renewal. I know I went through a lot of different information in a really quick way. So I actually put this little slide here to give a little bit of a summary of all the different dimensions and some of the little things that you could do. But I do want you to put in the chat, what is one thing you can do already in your life to get that energy renewal? It could be about your body. So it could be taking that break, sleeping more, eating better, eating that breakfast. It could be talking about your emotions. So expressing that gratitude towards others, belly breathing, reflecting on triggers. It could be about your mind, responding versus reacting. Don't beginning your day with emailing or thinking about your spirit, checking with your values, ask support from community. So I'm seeing in the chat so many different things. Turn off email alerts, beginning my day with my journal and some art, more exercise, prioritize sleep, setting boundaries on emails, think about what I'm grateful for, getting it from my desk and moving around more. So a lot of great things. I'm so glad you're all thinking about things. And even if you didn't put it in the chat, I would highly recommend writing it down or sharing with it a friend, because accountability is the best thing in terms of just figuring out what are better ways to support your own sense of resilience. All right, well, last but not least, I do want to end with this particular slide. I just think it's important to think about compassion for ourselves. So compassion for others begins with kindness to ourselves. I think oftentimes when we talk about self-care, people think that it's a selfish thing, but certainly in order to be resilient and to do the things that we love and enjoy most for the rest of the world and to service others, I do think we need to be kind to ourselves. So don't forget about self-compassion as you go along, as we figure out this whole global pandemic and all the years to come. So thank you so much for being here for this presentation.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mariko. Thank you for your time and your energy and dedication to making this workshop possible for our alumni. The topic of resiliency is so relevant to the times that we're living in, and I just so appreciate that you were willing to be here with us today to share some practical tools and things to keep in mind moving forward as we as our work and our home lives continue to evolve and change. And hopefully all who attended this workshop this evening will leave with new plans of action to find that inner strength when challenges arise. So we just thank you so much. We will be sending a follow-up email to all of our attendees this evening with a recording of this evening's event, as well as a short survey that will help guide my colleagues and I in the Alumni Association for planning future events. And lastly, if you are looking for ways to get involved with the Alumni Association, I encourage you to stop by our website. We're going to pop the link in the chat box. There you can fill out a get involved form, view a lineup of upcoming events, and learn about regional alumni chapters and affinity groups, and explore some of the benefits of membership. And so with that, thank you everyone for attending tonight. Have a great rest of your week, and go Ducks.